Hello and welcome to Cleveland Classic Cinema. Tonight's movie is 1965's Frankenstein Meets the Space Monster, directed by Robert Gaffney.
Do your eyes dare witness total terror? Frankenstein meets the Space Monster. This is it. For the first time on the screen, America's missile might mobilized against annihilating invaders from outer space.
We have come here to this planet for one purpose only, to acquire breeding stock to repopulate our planet.
See the kidnapping of the Earth Maidens for the love-starved slaves of the sterile planet.
Very good. We have done well, Nadia.
I am pleased, Princess. You are satisfied.
I will be satisfied when we have enough more like her to commence phase 3.
See the terrifying invasion of the beach party. See a United States astro robot become a creature of death. For the first time, see Earth horror versus space terror. Frankenstein meets the Space Monster in Futurama.
Well, here we are once again faced with an orphan movie. I'd heard of and seen clips from this movie for years, but I never saw it until last weekend. I knew it was going to be bad going in, so I suppose I have no one to blame but myself for the 3.5 hours I lost watching it. Misery, or in this case agony, loves company, however, so tonight I'm going to share it with you. This movie is only 77 minutes, but as I pointed out before, I watch everything I show at least 3 times before torturing you guys with it. I like to think that I watch it that many times so I can be sure of what I saw and write about it accurately, but I fear I really do it as a form of penance to atone for foisting this crap off on my unsuspecting viewers. On the other hand, I've been doing this show for, so I've been reminded, 8 years. So if you guys haven't figured out by now that we show mostly Drek, I have to wonder why I feel so guilty about polluting the airwaves with it. Must be my Catholic upbringing. Frankenstein Meets the Space Monster, also known as Mars Invades Puerto Rico, is right down there with the Creeping Terror and the Beasts of Yucca Flats, but has one thing over them. The fact that it has an actual soundtrack and doesn't have a narrator explaining what's going on, although that probably would have helped make it a bit more coherent. The plot is as follows. A spaceship containing the lovely Princess Markuzan, her flaming assistant, the appropriately named Dr. Nadir, and 7 or 8 other aliens enter Earth's space looking for breeding stock. It seems the planet they come from has had a nuclear war and the only survivors are on the spaceship. Dr. Nadir sees an unmanned spacecraft coming into their sector and assumes it's an attack, so they blow it out of the sky as he chuckles evilly. We then meet Dr. Adam Steele, his assistant Karen Grant, and General Bowers. They are accompanied by Frank, an astronaut chosen to journey to Mars and find out if it's inhabited or something. They have a press conference at NASA, and the reporters, all 4 of them, ask Frank questions. Everything goes pretty well until Frank makes a self-effacing remark and suddenly freezes up. Literally. The frame actually freezes on Frank's smiling face, and Dr. Steele makes a few lame excuses before leading Frank out of the room. You'd think this would raise a red flag among the reporters, but before anyone can question this, the general mentions that they're going for drinks, and all the reporters just blow off the instant his nerves. Dr. Steele and Karen take Frank into a lab and go to work on him. It turns out that Frank is actually an android cobbled together out of human body parts and an electronic brain. They open up his skull and we see half a brain on the inside of an old radio, complete with tubes. While Steele fools around in that mess, the general comes in and starts browbeating Steele for Frank's failure, assuring him that if Frank screws up the space flight, Steele and Steele alone will take the heat. Steele counters by arguing that Frank is expendable as opposed to sending a human, and that he'd be much more useful because he can accurately record all the information gathered. This one argument makes more sense than anything else in the movie. Once Frank is repaired, he's loaded into the spacecraft and takes off among several miles of NASA stock footage, which I believe includes astronaut Alan Shepard climbing into a van to the launch pad. Once Frank takes off, the ever-alert Dr. Nadir sees him coming and blows him out of the sky, accompanied by the same footage of a rocket exploding as seen before. Princess Marcouzan notices Frank using the escape pod and starts berating Dr. Nadir for letting him get away, and then they land to find the occupant. Since Frank never even got close to the aliens and in fact knows nothing of their presence, this seems like a bad idea, but she decides to err on the side of caution. The guy they send out finds Frank pretty quickly and nails him with a whammo air blaster, but only damages him. Frank understandably gets angry at this and punches the alien in the helmet several times before escaping. The damage is done, however, and Frank goes on a rampage, attacking everyone he comes across. The first one is a guy driving down the road with his girl. Frank steps out in front of their car, so the guy driving it gets out and attacks him with a smudge pot, of all things. Now, for the youthful people in the audience tonight, let me explain what a smudge pot is. At the time this film was made, there weren't any roadblock easels with flashing electric lights, so they used these little round metal things called smudge pots to mark hazards or areas under construction. They come in all kinds of shapes and sizes, but the one used in the movie are the most familiar. Smudge pots were kind of like little kerosene lamps with a little wick sticking out of it that would be lit to mark the perimeters of the area being blocked off so you could see it in the dark. As you will see in this movie, they made poor weapons. Meanwhile, the Martians are running around kidnapping girls in bikinis and blowing up whoever is with them in the bargain. None of these women put up much of a fight, but after seeing the guys they're with, it's understandable. Dr. Steele manages to track Frank down to Puerto Rico, so he, Karen, and the General hop a B-52, which magically changes into a C-135 before landing. Maybe they had a layover in Albuquerque. Anyway, once they land, Adam and Karen hop on a Vespa and go looking for Frank, taking time to see the sights. The sequence closely resembles a scene from 1963's Roman Holiday, which the director probably saw at some point. The main reason it's there is because the producers got free use of locations in Puerto Rico by promising to film some of the local points of interest. It also pads out the running time of the film, which is good, since I'm fairly certain they ran through all the stock footage they purchased before this. Steele finds Frank using a device that looks a lot like a cigarette lighter used on the Flintstones, and by talking to him calmly gets him to surrender. I suspect that the people Frank has killed probably would have survived this encounter if they hadn't instantly attacked him as soon as they saw him, but this isn't explored. While Steele works on Frank, Karen goes to get more help and manages to get herself kidnapped by the Martians. Enough of the plot, let's get to the bios. James Karen was born Jacob Karnofsky on November 29, 1923 in Wilkes-Barre, Pennsylvania. He studied acting in New York under Sanford Meisner at the Neighborhood Playhouse, and in 1947 made his Broadway debut in A Streetcar Named Desire. When he was between acting jobs, he made a living restoring and customizing cars. In 1948, he began his television career appearing in a telecast of A Christmas Carol, and has since appeared in over 100 shows. His first film was Frankenstein Meets the Space Monster, and he went on to make over 80 films, including Return of the Living Dead and Poltergeist. He's also made more than 5,000 commercials and has been honored with both a Saturn Award by the Academy of Science Fiction, Fantasy, and Horror, and the Buster Award given by the International Buster Keaton Society. Karen was actually a close friend of Buster Keaton, having toured with him during the 1950s with the stage play Merton of the Movies. He's also a close friend of novelist Robert Ludlum, the two of them having met while starting their acting careers. Ludlum, of course, went on to become a celebrated novelist, writing such novels as The Osterman Weekend and the Jason Bourne series, starting with The Bourne Identity. James Karen is still working to this day. Marilyn Hanold was born on June 9, 1938 in Jamaica, Long Island, New York. After graduating from the World Secretarial School in New York, she worked as a legal secretary before joining the chorus line at the El Rancho Hotel in Las Vegas. She soon became a featured performer in the hotel's Scandalettes Revue, and soon moved on to Los Angeles, where she appeared at the Moulin Rouge and was spotted by a William Morris talent agent, winning a spot in George Gobel's production Riviera Review. She appeared on the cover issue of the February 1959 issue of Photo Life magazine, and in June of that year was Playmate of the Month in Playboy. She appeared in a small number of films and TV shows before marrying oil tycoon Rulon Keaton Nielsen in 1967, after which she retired to raise a family. She now lives in Salt Lake City, Utah. Bruce Glover was born Bruce Herbert Glover on May 2, 1932 in Chicago, Illinois. He's a familiar face to fans of action and exploitation films, having appeared in over 105 movies and TV shows during his 45-year career. He began in television, usually playing juvies or slimy bad guys, a task his looks were well suited for. His biggest movie was probably 1971's Diamonds Are Forever, in which he played half of a gay hit team. He appeared as a deputy sheriff in 1973's Walking Tall and the sequel, 1975's Walking Tall Part 2. He appeared as a redneck thug in 1971's Bless the Beasts and Children, and as yet another thug in 1974's Chinatown. He always gave a compelling, believable performance and is still working today, teaching acting classes in Los Angeles. Glover does double duty in tonight's film, portraying both the second-in-command of the spaceship and the space monster itself. He once said, "Sometimes the best thing you could do is a real bad film. You could improvise all over the place and probably only improve the script." I bet he learned that doing this movie. Frankenstein Meets the Space Monster is an awful movie, but it contains enough unintentional laughs to make it somewhat entertaining. It was actually written as a comedy in the first draft of the script, as pointed out by one of the writers in the liner notes for the film. Frank was originally supposed to have the legs of a vaudeville tap dancer, and every time somebody whistled Sweet Georgia Brown, he was to start tap dancing uncontrollably. The producers, being first-class stick-in-the-muds, forbade the humor and forced the writers to tone it down considerably. The writers did as they were instructed, but there's still a lot of pretty funny stuff in here, like when Dr. Nadir finds the tracking device on Karen. The rest of it is mostly just a byproduct of the cheapness of the movie, like the bars of the cell being made out of 2x2 wood slats and the purification chamber being constructed out of plywood. Then there's the makeup. The aliens are bald and have pointy ears, but the edges of the bald caps aren't blended too well, and where they end and the skin begins is horrendously obvious. In addition, the makeup budget must have been really low, since only 3 of the 10 or so occupants of the ship ever remove their helmets. So right now, sit back, relax, and enjoy Frankenstein Meets the Space Monster, right here on Cleveland Classic Cinema.